behalf of Campbell & Company, I'd like to welcome you to Onboarding and Retaining a Top Flight Advancement Team. Before we begin today's presentation, I'd like to quickly review some logistics for those of you who may be new to Campbell & Company webinars. So first, to ensure that you have the best experience possible, please close any programs other than GoToWebinars, of course, that are running on your computer. Call in using a telephone instead of your computer speakers. Move your cell phone away from your computer. And if you experience any visual issues, send a chat to Campbell & Company. You may also contact GoToWebinar at 1-800-263-6317. Today's webinar will last 60 minutes, and you can earn 1 continuing education credit, and that's good for certification with CFRE International. About an hour after the webinar, you will receive an email from GoToWebinars that includes information on how to download the PowerPoint, any information regarding today's presentation, and information on how to register for our next webinar. So we do welcome questions during the session, so if you have any, please send a question to Campbell & Company, and I will make sure to ask them throughout. And now I'd like to take a moment to introduce Marian Alexander DeBerry and James Coulord. Marian is the Director of Executive Search at Campbell & Company. She has more than 30 years of professional experience, including 19 years in executive search, and she has conducted hundreds of searches in the nonprofit sector. Marian has a Bachelor of Psychology and Sociology from Duke University and a Master's of Business Administration from the Wharton School of Business. And Marian is here in our Chicago office. Out in Seattle, we have James Coulord, CFRE. He is a senior consultant at Collins Group, a division of Campbell & Company. He has more than 30 years of development and marketing experience and several successful multi-million-dollar campaigns under his belt. He was the Executive Director of Development at Pacific Lutheran University for 11 years, where he was part of 3 capital campaigns. His recent hired clients include Seattle Colleges, University of Washington School of Public Health, and Mount Angel Abbey. James has his bachelor's degree in English from Southern Connecticut State University, a master's degree in journalism from University of Oregon, and a Master's of Arts in Transformational Spirituality from Seattle University. And if you try saying that about 100 times, you'll get very confused. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Marian and James.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Same here. Thanks for joining us, and look forward to getting underway. So the next slide, we want to go into what we hope you will get out of today's webinar. So here are our thoughts for desired outcomes. We'd like you to go away with a sense of how to develop an effective onboarding strategy, learn the keys to retaining new employees, and also develop strategies for tapping into new employees' energy without alienating them from the rest of the team. So we think it's important that you get a sense of not only how to bring people in, but how to bring them in a way that keeps new talent fresh and keeps people in it for the long haul. So next we have a survey. Sarah, you want to lead us through that?
All right, it is in motion. So how long have you been with your organization? Less than 1 year, 1 to 5 years, or 5+ years? You can take that. All right. Can you get some answers in? Okay, and here are the answers. So looks like 31% have been less than 1 year, another 31% 1 to 5 years, so it's pretty much broken down evenly, and then 38% 5+ years. Okay, thank you for doing that. And it looks like we have one more question. What is your role in onboarding new employees? You're responsible for onboarding, you participate in, or you have no responsibility in onboarding new employees. Okay, answers are coming in. So it looks like the majority either participate in or are responsible for. Some of you out there have no responsibilities, so hopefully this session will be educational for you. So I think I'm turning it back over to James.
Yeah, we thought that by way of introducing ourselves, we would share a story of our own onboarding successes and fails. One thing that we all have in common, everyone on this webinar today, is that we've all been onboarded in one way or the other. And so we want to talk about our stories. But before I do, Sarah, do we have another survey, or are we going to the onboarding successes and fails slide?
I think we're all set.
Okay. Great. So here's my story. When I was a new development director at an independent school in a land far away in a time long ago, I was also responsible for all the marketing and communications. And when I came on to my new job, I really was not onboarded at all, but I was connected with the chair of the development committee. And in my process of reviewing our processes for how we got materials designed and printed, I found that we were using a board member's advertising agency, and the fees that we were charged were outrageous. So I went about putting out to bid the next time we had to print a newsletter. And of course, as you can imagine, I did not choose the long-term board member whose advertising firm we've been using forever. And she was quite upset with me, felt that I was the newcomer coming in and taking things outside of the family. So being new and being nervous, I went to see this board member who was the development committee chair, and I started to tell him the story and what had happened and what I had done. And before I even got halfway through, he stopped me and he said, I just want you to know that we brought you on here to do things differently and to shake things up. So I don't want you to have any concern about what you did. I'll handle it. I'll make sure that everything is taken care of. And I like to tell that story because it's a kind of accidental onboarding story, but it shows what a good onboarding experience can be like, where you have somebody who's willing to take your back, and not castigate you because you tried something new. And so we'll talk about mentors and pals and buddies, but keep that in mind in terms of how you're going to be dealing with new employees when they want to do things maybe differently that have been done in the past and create some upset in the process. Over to you, Marion.
And now an onboarding story that didn't work. I moved to Chicago several years ago and joined a company, and I went to what was then called personnel, filled out lots of forms, came upstairs, was told, here's your desk. And I sat down, didn't know anyone. No one introduced themselves to me. They didn't realize that I was coming. I had no one to eat lunch with, didn't know where to eat lunch. I had moved halfway across the country to take this job. And I went out to dinner that night with a friend and said, I believe that I've made a terrible mistake. That went on for a few days until finally some people started to introduce themselves, and I did acclimate. But I will tell you, one of the things, and it goes to culture, was that this was a company that worked on Saturdays. I had no idea. Nobody told me. But I can just see all of them, thinking on Saturday morning, where is she? Why isn't she here? Or she doesn't have a high work ethic. I honestly didn't know. I didn't stay with that company very long. I was there maybe a year and a half, and then I moved on to something else. I tell that story because it was a little bit sobering for me. I understand that I've made a mistake because the values that never were told to me, or I never felt that I was part of the company. And I can imagine that there may be some of you that have felt that way, or that there are people that you are helping to bring into the organization, and perhaps it's not been as optimal as you thought. So we tell those stories to show you both sides of it and how we hopefully can start to think about some solutions that will address it. When we think about onboarding, we think about a 90-day window because this is an opportunity for you to really make an imprint on the person that you're bringing into the organization. And research tells us that there are several reasons why you would think about onboarding someone. There are lots of them, but one of the most important ones might be that it builds confidence in the employees. One, that they've made the right decision by coming to the organization or institution, that they really are in a company of peers. And another reason to bring it to think about it is that there can be clarity about the job. You've all seen position guides, you've all used them, but there are the things that are in between the position guides that aren't on paper that a person really needs to know and understand now. Onboarding can address that. It's an early opportunity for you to think about working with your manager and getting to know your peers in a different way. Those of you who are direct calling officers, perhaps you are now thinking also about how you might work with board members within your institution. So these are some of the reasons that you would think about onboarding and doing it early and doing it well, frankly. James, I think you have some things that you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I just think that the question of why bother to onboard is just that you're setting the tone. I mean, it's a cliche to say you only have a first chance to make a first impression, but it's really true when someone comes into an organization that those first 90 days are critical to them getting a sense of what the organization is about. And also, one of the keys is to build confidence that they can succeed within the organization, clarity about the job, and social integration. And when it comes to social integration, I just want to say that it's important, especially in a development role, that you think about how that person is going to be integrated into the organization with the development team, of course, with the key external folks that they're going to be working with, but also the key internal people in the organization. One of the things that I say is when you're with somebody who's new and you're walking around the organization, regardless of what type of organization it is, my mantra is over-introduce. Introduce that person to everybody. Don't assume that they know anybody. So you're walking around, you come up to a conversation with somebody, don't leave the person hanging. Make sure they know who that person is. The other thing is to find the people who have inspired you at the organization, who you feel exemplify the mission, who really are great representatives of what that organization is doing in the community, and try to arrange opportunities for the new person to meet those people as well, because that will give them a sense of confidence and inspiration and moving forward. And all of that leads to a better knowledge of the organization and a better sense of where they might fit into it. So Marion, I think you're going to talk a little bit about why onboarding is so important.
I know this is one of James's favorite slides, and I have to tell you that originally he had a little boy being inoculated, and we decided that was a little too gruesome. So we changed it, and we now have some happy people dancing.
But they've received their inoculations. I want to point that out.
But it's a reality that particularly in development, there are some really high and sobering turnovers. And one of the things that onboarding can do is help to inoculate against that. It's the first point of employee engagement. And we see three legs to this. We see acquisition, onboarding, and then retention. And this is the second part. And if you've done the acquisition well, this is the pickup. This is the relays, where now you can think about how you can make sure that people know what they're supposed to do, know that they're going to be supported, knowing that they're in a good environment for them and that they've made the right decision about joining the organization. It also increases their own job satisfaction. It's the unseen things or the untalked about things that make this work for them, so that they know that they're going to have opportunities for the responsibility that they originally signed on for, that there will be increased responsibilities over time in the ideal, that they will be in a company of people that will support them and want them to be there. And so these are the things that also come out through the onboarding process. And then finally, most important, it can increase performance. You begin to know the informal chains that you can access, the people who can be a resource to you, and you also begin to know your job a little bit better. Sometimes it seems that you spend the time in what we have been calling a super orientation. Again, it's form oriented, it has to do with process, it has to do with logistics. That's all important, but it is these kinds of intangibles where a person really begins to be part of the organization that makes the difference in a strong onboarding process. I was in a conversation this morning about onboarding, and what's interesting is I think that people are really understanding and appreciating the value of having one, but what isn't quite as strong yet is a consistent process either across the board in terms of how people are doing it, or even within institutions and organizations, who's doing it and who's doing it for whom. In the ideal, this is a process that works all throughout the organization, from the top all the way down, from the bottom all the way up, because everyone has a part in it. And we just want to emphasize that because it will be increasingly important going forward.
And I just want to add one thing before we move to the survey, if we can, and that is that the issue with onboarding is that nobody really has that in their job description, and we spend so much time when we have to do a hire, the advertising, the gathering of the resumes, the sifting through, the narrowing it down to the couple candidates, making the offer, finally getting somebody to come on, that many of us could be exhausted by the end of that process, and onboarding becomes an afterthought. And so what we're suggesting here is that it's such a key part that you really need to be putting that into your plan for bringing new blood into the organization, and not let it be an afterthought. Okay, let's go to the survey.
All right.
So
it looks like we have a
this one,
question
Sarah?
here. How many of you are hiring? So you're either in the process of hiring or not hiring right now. Pretty easy. Responses are coming in. It's like 71% of you are in the process of hiring, so pretty
Interesting.
majority. And then next question is, are you thinking of hiring for a campaign? So either you're in the process of hiring for a campaign or you're not hiring right now. Okay, and the survey says, 42% are in the process of hiring, 57% not hiring right now, so pretty even. Okay. All right, James, I'm turning it back to you.
So when we look at the first 90 days, what are the specific tools that you should be considering with a new employee? And the first one we think is very important is an individual written plan. And this can be done one of two ways. One is to provide the employee with an outline of what you hope he or she will accomplish in their first 90 days. And having it written out could be important. And we're talking, one page with bullets, with tasks and timelines. Another thing that we found to be effective is that talking to the employee in the initial conversation when they're coming on and asking them to develop a written plan of what they hope to accomplish in the first 90 days and having that be a point of conversation. What I like about the second part is that it involves the employee in that conversation, in that discussion, and gives you a sense of what they see as their priorities, and maybe there'd be an opportunity to refigure that based on what they say. In a development job, key to some of those things that should be in those first 90 days are what we call stakeholder meetings. So how do we get them out among their people that they're going to be connecting with in the donor community, be this board members, development committee members, etc., making sure that they're well integrated among your key stakeholders, both external and internal. Like I said, if they're going to be at a college or university and in charge of fundraising for a specific school or division, making sure that they are connected with the key stakeholders, either deans, faculty members, alumni, in that particular area. And then the next one is looking at mentoring, coaching, what we call buddies, and training. This really begins at the onboarding time, but goes on throughout the life of their time there. One of the things that we see done and done well is assigning the new person with a buddy from within the department, and providing that person a touch point, somebody who's agreed in advance to be their point of contact, their kind of informal peer point of contact, as opposed to the supervisor, who could help answer questions, either practical or cultural about the organization, and help them through the process. In addition, depending on where the employee fits within the organization, mentoring could be very important, especially for junior people who for whom it would be important to have somebody serving in that role. That could either be in the in the department or outside of the department, but determining if someone could benefit from a mentoring relationship. And of course, your role as a supervisor is to provide ongoing coaching and training to make sure that if there's any gaps in knowledge of what they need to do their job well, that you're finding ways to fill that gap with training. And then the last one is just regular check-ins, whether that's a half hour once a week. Most people have regular meetings with the people that report to them. But in that first 90 days, it's really important that you do it on a very frequent basis. So I'd like a weekly half-hour check-in, and then as they become more acclimated and after the first 90 days, it can go to monthly or whatever the regular meeting schedule is. But these are some things that we feel are really important that you look at for the first 90 days to make sure that the onboarding goes well and gets off to a good start.
One of the questions that we've gotten about these suggestions, however, is when am I supposed to have the time to do this? And we will admit that it may take more time than you're currently committing to this. However, the payoff is in the end in a higher retention. But to talk a little bit more about the buddy system and what that means, it's straightforward. You assign someone and they have a regular conversation, but it also begins to get at that informal kinds of knowledge exchange that doesn't necessarily happen in a more formal orientation. For instance, where do you eat lunch? Are you with people that even eat lunch? Do they eat lunch at their desk? How are visits handled? This is a kind of informal exchange, or perhaps there's a difference in culture in the way that decisions are made or what good looks like, and now you have a peer exchange. We say, well, you know, this is really, we do things a little bit differently here, and this is an opportunity for that. For coaching, there may be areas that you've identified before the person starts that you really think that this is a very strong employee, you're very excited about their coming there, but there may be some things that you'd like to work on. This could be an opportunity to really establish a plan so that the person is already beginning to optimize who they are in the organization or institution. And then finally, training. Training can be the training that happens within a department or division, but it also could be outside training that approaches professional development, part of the person's professional development profile. And so these are just some of the suggestions that have come out of lots of conversation and also from the research that is emerging around onboarding on ways to be effective. When we think about advancement, there are some things that we think and that the research is showing that will create stronger direct advancement officers. One is the person clear about the institution's mission? Now, you're surprised you brought this person on, you certainly talked to them about it, but yet they really aren't clear about the institution's mission, particularly when it's a capital campaign. Is there also clarity around the case for support? And are these things that you can share with new employees? Another idea is there a strategic plan that can be shared? Now, there's a kind of lively discussion about, do you share this on paper or do you share it online? Because lots of information is available online. We defer and think that you should actually do both, because you'll have people that really prefer to just go find the information and you point them to it and you give them the links, and there are others that would like to have a nice smallish binder on their desk when they get there that they feel welcome about, and that's something that you can share with them. Other nice things came up, such as would you give a map or a floor plan to where people sit, who they are, and include a picture, so that they don't feel as if they're stumbling around because on the first day they met 18 or 20 people and they can't remember the names so well. Is there a tour of the organization or institution that a person can participate in so that they get their bearings and know where they're going? Particularly since when we're in our organizations for a while, we start to use some inside jargon and language, and people don't quite know where they're going. James has a nice story about Seattle University, and
yeah.
one of the things they do is they take people around and show them sort of the important and hallowed places on campus, and it's a good reference point for them.
So part of the institution's mission involves its character, and it's difficult to convey that on paper. And one of our clients is Seattle University, which is a Roman Catholic / Jesuit college here in Seattle. And one of the iconic buildings on campus is the Chapel of St. Ignatius. And the thing about this chapel is not only is it an architectural wonder, but every piece of that building, in the design, it's incorporated in a way that it tells the story of the life of St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius, the founder of the Jesuits, back 500 years ago, well, probably 600 years ago now. So by giving new people a tour of that chapel, not just as an interesting building, but how that building explains who St. Ignatius was, how the Jesuit philosophy was begun, what aspects of his life led to the formation of the Jesuits and their approach to spirituality, their approach to where they fit within the Catholic tradition. All of that can be had in one particular building. So the question I would ask you to consider is, are there any kind of iconic places like that at your organization, or maybe a person who embodies the character and the mission of the place that would be worthwhile exposing your new hires to, so that they could get a deeper understanding of what your organization is all about, and also the roots of where it comes from?
Thanks, James.
You bet.
So a few other things to include in the binder or links. what about clear job descriptions for everyone that's in the division? And certainly organization charts, we've talked about that a little, and bios of leadership, board members, development committee, everyone in advancement, some key figures that the person absolutely should know about, particularly if it's a large organization or institution and you don't get to know everyone right away.
And typically a lot of that stuff, Marion, I think, you know, when I look at it and wonder about people thinking, oh my goodness, how am I going to put all this together? Most of that exists. It's not having to create it from whole. So look at that list from that slide again and the others, and just, you know, figure where can you get this information that already does exist and just aggregate it into one easy to use binder or link, etc.
Yeah, that's right. It can be easily pulled and easily updated for the most part. I heard of one story where we asked this question of what kind of information was available to new employees, and one person said, oh yeah, it's available, but it sits on the receptionist's desk, and so, you know, not everyone has access to it, but it's there if you really want it. Well, you know, don't make your audience work.
Good point.
But other things that can really enhance this process is the institution's history, which we've already talked about, and fact sheets, little pages that people can easily refer to. I heard of one idea which I thought was really interesting. It's a little box, a small box, and it can sit on your desk, and it has little cards in it, and each card will have something, some fact sheet or some small thing that a person should really know about the institution. I thought it was clever. It could be a little bit hard to put together initially, but it could be something that could be useful and worthwhile. And then dashboards, so that people begin to understand that metrics are part of the work, and they are used to it early, and become acclimated on that. This is something that they're going to be that they're going to see over time. And finally, policies and procedures. You know, the stuff that isn't necessarily that interesting to read, but is really necessary for the success of the person. So James is going to talk about encouragement versus accountability, because we want people to understand this is not an HR exercise. It really is an opportunity to have the person become an integral part of the organization that they've joined. And I think this introduces that nicely.
So when we say encouragement versus accountability, really all supervising employees is balancing those two things. But we want to talk a little bit about accountability standards for major gift officers. And the reason why I bring this up is because the industry has yet to really settle on what accountability standards should look like, as in number of visits, number of calls, you know, are there financial standards, accountability standards that major gift officers hold? My only comment about that is to say it's important to develop a standard. However you come to it, however you land on it, there's a lot of research and there's a lot of practices out there, but just come to something that you can share with your employees, particularly your new employees, so they really know what's expected of them. I've been in a number of development positions where I've basically been given a list of my quote-unquote prospects, but no sense of how many am I supposed to be calling, what, you know, what is the expectation around what I'm supposed to be doing. So coming up with accountability standards, sharing that, being clear is really important. The other thing is motivational techniques. So how do you motivate not only your new employee, but all the employees in your development shop? And I want to share one little technique that a supervisor of mine did. I was at a hospital system, and it was a fairly small shop. But any time that we would get a large gift, or it was usually around a gift, but something else that would be good, the supervisor, my boss, would go around the office and he'd ask us to tell him what kind of coffee we wanted. Of course, we're in the Northwest. All we do is drink coffee, and there's 1,000 kinds that you can get. And he'd go around the office, he'd say, what do you want? He'd write it down, his little notepad. And then there was a Starbucks, of course, right below our office. And he would go and he'd buy the coffee, and he'd bring it back, and he'd gather us all in the staff room. And he'd hand out the coffee, and then he'd make his announcement that we just got a, whatever, $1 million gift or whatever had happened. But the neat thing about that is that from that point on, every time he went around the office and started asking us for our coffee orders, we knew there was good news, and we knew there was something that he was going to share. And the other thing I liked about it is that while it was a group celebration, we always knew which one of us was responsible for bringing in that gift or played a key role, or if there were more than one of us. And that would be called out as well. But it was in a way that it was both motivation for the individual. You wanted to be the next reason why we all gathered in the break room and had a special cup of coffee. But look for those kinds of ways to motivate the team, celebrate accomplishments. I don't think we celebrate near enough in our work the accomplishments that are happening to keep people motivated. The next around compensation, bonuses, etc. Typically, compensation is very clear when someone gets on board, but make sure in terms of benefits, etc., that they understand. In development, typically bonuses are not spoken of, but are there benefits that aren't perhaps financial for employees who exceed the number of calls that they make? I know some development offices that if the office as a whole exceeds its dollar goal for the year, that half of that extra, if you will, does get handed out in bonuses. So just be clear on what they are with your employees. And lastly, upward mobility. What are the opportunities for your person to move up? This is often tricky within an organization. There may not be a lot of opportunities. I know that some very remote organizations have trouble hiring people to remote parts of the country, but what I've heard as far as an upward mobility pitch, if you will, is being able to say that to that employee, if you put in 5 years here, you'll be able to have the experience and have the breadth of knowledge you need to move on to the next step of your career. Be realistic with people. Let them know what it is that might be available to them in terms of upward mobility. And with that, Marion has some, oh no, they're bringing in the new blood. That's still me.
Well, I can certainly kick it off for you, James.
Okay, please do so.
One of the things about this onboarding is you're attracted to a particular person because you think they're going to bring in new ideas, they're going to, really shake up things for you, and then they get there and you're not quite sure that you want them to shake it up quite as much as you thought. And so part of the question is, do you really want this to happen? So, James, take it away.
Well, I think, how to incorporate new ideas. I think it's really important that you think about asking the person for his or her new ideas and, be receptive to their input. Realize that, and I've experienced this, and perhaps many of you have, where a lot of the ideas coming into an organization, and you're the new person, that you have are actually ideas that the organization may have tried 1,000 times and failed 1,000 times. But you don't know that. And nothing is worse than bringing up a new idea and having the immediate response being, oh yeah, we tried that, it didn't work. So, be open, be responsive, be generous in your response, and give somebody the benefit of the doubt in terms of their suggestions. Just because somebody has a new idea doesn't mean that we necessarily have to implement it. So next, the question.
And if I
Yeah,
can
go
add
ahead,
to
Mary.
that, James.
Please do.
Yeah, I was going to add to that and say that in some ways this sounds like we may be moving away from the onboarding conversation, but we really aren't, because if we talk about that 90-day window, we're talking about where a person really wants to get off on the right foot and really make a difference and add value to the institution. And so they will start to introduce ideas that they've been thinking about or that they're bringing with them or something that they've tried and has been successful before. And so this is an opportunity to really start to incorporate their knowledge and their thinking into the institution itself. And I just want to make that point because I think sometimes there can be a little bit of resistance around it.
Right. And to go to the next point, to Marion, do we really want new blood? I think it's hard to say we want to hire somebody and we don't want to incorporate any new energy or new thoughts into our organization. But to Marion's point, really be clear with yourself of how open you are to that, and don't advertise the position as we really want new blood, new ideas, innovation, shake things up, if that's really not what you want. The next one is about staying open to new ideas, and that has more to do with being receptive in the moment and not shutting people down with things that they have to say. And then lastly, and Marion, I'd like your comment on this, how long is someone new? How long does that typically, that new title, hang on to somebody, would you say?
James, I think that a person is reasonably new for a year. They haven't seen an entire cycle of the organization yet, and I think that that's their break-in period. Now, after that, they're still new-ish, frankly, but I do think that a year is probably reasonable to think that they're still a new employee. What do you think?
I think you're right, and I would add that I think after a year they can drop the new title. I'm the new person on staff. But in development, especially among major gift officers, I really find it takes 5 years to be working really at peak productivity, because it takes that long to really develop the relationships. Some relationships with donors I've developed right away. Others have taken longer to do that. Some donors don't want to work with me. They'd rather work with somebody else. I mean, all that stuff takes time to sift out. So I agree with you about the title being new, but getting up to optimum productivity, I say 5 years, maybe it's 3, but it's more than 1.
And I've heard it expressed that gifts that you have in the first year to year and a half, they really are gifts that you've inherited. They're not exactly your gifts yet. And that can be another marker of how long someone is new. What are the gifts that really your participation made a difference in that gift?
All right. And then we've got one more slide before we want to open it up to questions, and about what if after all this time, effort, energy, hiring, onboarding, what if it was the wrong hire? And I think, Marion, you've got some thoughts here, and I'll add some as well.
Well, you can do everything right, and it still may not turn out the way that you would like to see it happen. So I think there are times when you do recognize that you have perhaps not optimized the hiring here. I won't say it's the wrong hiring, because I think the person may be the right place, but this just may not be it. But I think if you have a strong onboarding process, you can actually address that earlier than you might have had you just let the person come in, take their seat, and start to do the work. Because now some antennas should come up for you if you really believe that this is a wrong person, and you have the opportunity, again, not in a punitive HR sense, but to say, I really think that perhaps you should take this approach, or this is the way that things happen here, or this is the way success looks here, or this is what good looks like here. You have several points where you're able to check in with this person and recalibrate. And it can point out one of two things. this was just a stumble and the person really is the correct hire, or perhaps there is something that you need to think about that they may not be the fit that you thought it was, but you have an opportunity now to address it, I think, earlier than you would have. You know, moving to probationary period suggests now HR has been introduced, and ideally this happens very, very seldom for you, but we'd be unrealistic if we thought that it didn't happen at all. And if we do move to that and find that it's not going to still be successful, then you think about ways that the person may transition out of the organization. But, you know, onboarding works two ways. It's a chance for you to also observe and see whether or not this person is going to be the fit that you think it is. I'll hesitate to say a long-term fit, because long-term is relative here, isn't it? But, James, what are your thoughts?
You know, all I want to say about this is I have been involved, and I'm sure many people on this webinar have been involved, with a situation where you hire somebody and then, you know, usually you hire them, there's a 2 to 5, 3-week gap, whatever, they finally land in the office, and after the first week or so, you just have this sinking feeling that the person who showed up at the interview is different than the person who shows up at the job. And I've had that happen on a number of occasions, and I think it's just to recognize that A, that does happen, B, it's not necessarily the fault of the hiring process, and C, to be thinking in terms of how can we use this person to the maximum of our ability for as long as possible. But I would say at the most, give it a year, and if it's not working out, then find a way to part ways. I know people have a 90-day probationary period typically, but that seems to be moving more into the past. But if 90 days you feel that it's so glaringly obvious, you know, I've never had a fellow manager regret letting go of somebody too soon. Many managers have many regrets over letting low-performing employees stay on too long. So better to make the tough decision earlier than let it drag on later, because it'll bring down the entire morale of the department the longer this person stays.
James, it sounds like you may have had some first-hand experience around it.
Yes, I have, and I've definitely been the guilty party of letting somebody, just hoping that it's going to turn around. Luckily, it's been the exception, not the rule, but it just has never turned around.
Yeah, and often it's just that it's not the right fit. It's not necessarily the fault of the person. That's
right. That's right. And every organization has a culture, and a culture is like a family. And you just can't always bring somebody from the outside into a family and expect that they're going to fit into the way things work there. And that's often another thing that I see. People just fight the culture because they can't find their niche to belong in it.
So I think we can. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think we can open to questions.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes.
We've got 10 minutes. We can open to questions.
Yeah, and we've got some questions.
And we've got questions.
We do. I am a board member for a very small private K-12 school. 1 year ago, the board approved creating a fundraising position and hired its first development/marketing director. The director and position have now been eliminated because the school administrator had no idea how to manage the position or the person. As a board member, what should I have done to make this bad situation work?
Ooh, good question.
Oh, the easy ones first.
You want to take a stab, Marion? You want me to?
Well, we both will take a stab. I'm still processing slightly because I'm walking it through. But if you want to start.
I'll start. I would say that in a small independent school, your chief development officer is your head of school. And before you bring on somebody with that role or that title, the question is, how committed is your head of school to fulfilling that portion of his or her duties. They're the face of the school, and if anything, a development professional, while they're also helping with the solicitations, etc., a large part of their job is positioning the head of school for success. And if the head of school does not want to be positioned in that way, then you're going to have problems. But that would be the first thing, is to gain clarity with the head of school of what they perceive and the board perceives is her or his role when it comes to advancement.
And I know that this is hindsight, but I think if there had been an opportunity to shape the profile of this person so that you took into account the head of the organization's management challenges, you may have seen a different outcome. Because even though it's assumed that this person is going to report to the head of the organization, of course, is the head of school. If they're not able, if management isn't their strength, then you balance it with someone who may not need as much management, and that way you can, I think, assure success, because it sounds like, and I'm making some assumptions here, it sounds like you still need that position. You eliminated it because the person couldn't manage the person, but you still have a gap in the institution. And I hope that addresses it for you. If not, send me another question.
Or they can be in touch with you guys too.
That's right.
I like this question. Have you found that onboarding is also important for in-house transitions and promotions?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes, because the person may make some assumptions that the culture in their new division will be the same as the one that they left. So I think that it may be even more important internally because they are moving to a different part of the organization. And I think you move them through the same thing.
So you move them through the same process?
You move them through the same process.
And I think it's really important when the person, and I'm not sure exactly the genesis of the question, but what came to my mind is somebody who is, say, a peer, say in the development office, they're a major gift officer and they get promoted to executive director of development. So now they've been with a bunch of peers and now they're the boss of those peers. I think an onboarding situation is critical, especially with thinking in advance, how are they going to establish themselves now in a supervisory position with these people who were their peers, who are their friends, etc. It's definitely worth thinking through and consciously working to position that person as a supervisor and making sure that you provide opportunities so that they can really embrace that role and be seen by the people they're supervising in that new role.
James, I think that's a really good point. And there's actually another one that I want to make about when you're working those kinds of transitions, and that's that. Oh, my thought's gone. Sorry.
We can go on to the next question.
Yeah, please do the next question, and hopefully we can come back to this one.
You know, if it were Friday, I could say that would be next year.
It's Friday in Australia.
True. So another question here regarding, and I believe that it was on one of the first slides regarding the 90-day onboarding period about individual written plans. Can you go into more detail regarding kind of what that means and what that should look like?
It's generally the plan of what will be accomplished and what the expectations are and what will be accomplished in the next 90 days. And any, for instance, in addition to just the accomplishments, it's also perhaps events that are expected to be attended, the kind of professional development and learning that might happen, also training opportunities that people will have to do. Oh, and now I'm remembering what my point was. Again, it had the point to do with time, because often what's expected is you've got this onboarding process. It's really clear, it's really elegant, it's really nice, but yet there's pressure from the person's direct manager saying, get on the road, go raise money. And you can, this onboarding, this is all really nice, you can do that later. But what we've learned, again, research supports this, beginning research around this, is that if you take the time to invest in this part of the process for the person, you'll have an even more effective officer on the road. And so that was the point that I wanted to make earlier about James' point.
Yeah, I would say that when I look at a 90-day written plan, I'm looking at my key sort of constituency groups, if you will. So there's internal to the development department, there's internal to the organization as a whole, and then there is the donors, and then there is, say the board or other volunteer leadership. And I would look at each of those areas and think what's reasonable in a 90-day period for them to accomplish in terms of, and I think more in terms of getting out and meeting folks. And if there are some donor prospects who are at a point where they're getting ready to make their gift decisions, I mean, it's hard to send a new person into that situation because typically they've been brought along by somebody else. But if somebody that's well known to the organization that would be willing to work with a new person, I would include that in the 90-day period to see about making so many solicitations. But anyways, finding reasonable expectations in those key areas and setting expectations for goals for how many visits, how many contacts to make in the first 90 days.
Okay, great. So it looks like we're all set here, and we're about at the hour. If you do have questions or additional ones that we haven't been able to address today, you can email Marion and James. Their email addresses are up on the screen. Also, just want to let you know that our next webinar is Fundraising Communication 301. So this kind of builds on 101 and 201. And that is scheduled for April 8th at from 12 to 1 Central Time. So you can go ahead and go to our website to register if you're interested. But James and Marion, thank you so much. And to everyone, thank you for joining us today. We hope you have a wonderful spring. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.